Welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Philip Levinson, CMO at Mobileforce. Excited to welcome you to our webinar entitled Scaling Smarter in HubSpot Today, Automating Lead Gen, Sales Workflows, and CPQ for Established and Growing Businesses. This is very important. Everyone is talking about scaling smarter. Everyone is talking about automation and AI. We're going to touch on both those themes today. We have some expert panelists. Let's get to it. First, let me check in with each of them, and let me start with Heather Hershey at IDC. Heather, how are you?
I'm doing wonderfully. Thank you so much for asking, Philip.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, and I believe you're joining us from Ohio, you said, right?
Yes, and it's a beautiful day today, but I'm happy to be spending it with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining. And we've got from HubSpot, Oscar Zamorano. Hey, Oscar, how are you?
How's it going, Philip?
Thanks for joining. We've got, I believe, from Pennsylvania, Bryan Byler, CRO at Aptitude 8. Hey there, Bryan.
Hey, all, great to be here.
And someone I love to work with and for, Jagadish Bandhole, CEO of Mobileforce. Hey, Jagadish.
Thanks, Phil. Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
It's so great to have you. We're going to talk about a lot of important things. Let's just get started. Before we jump into the agenda, I want to actually just open things up with a question for the audience. First, this will be an interactive webinar, so feel free to drop any comments or questions in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to get to those. But here's a quick one to get started. We want to ask each of you, if you can just drop in the chat, what is your top go-to-market or RevOps focus area that your team has for this year that you'd like to see discussed today? Anything, any topic area, whether it's lead gen or lead management or quoting or closing or CRM, just drop that in. We want to touch on that, and we'll share some of those thoughts as we get started. I did want to mention that our agenda is tight. We'll keep things moving. Once I'm done introducing things, we're going to hand things over to Heather, who's going to talk about modern sales enablement. Then we've got Oscar coming up, who's going to talk about streamlining a lot of these lead gen to closing processes. Jagadish is going to chime in on quoting and CPQ processes inside HubSpot. And Bryan's going to help weave things all together, focusing on implementing sales and RevOps solutions that are optimized for your company. And after that, we'll have Q&A. So keep those questions coming, and let's get started. Before I hand things over to Heather, I want to set the context for today's discussion. And because the focus of our webinar is on scaling smarter, I want to pick up on two quotes from Yamini, CEO of HubSpot, from Inbound 2023 and 2024. First, what she said in 2023, very interesting. She said, it's time to flip the sales formula. More reps, more tools, more activities don't work anymore. It's up to efficient AI-assisted reps with connected tools and the right amount of activities. That's the new formula for success. So she said that, and that ties in with this scaling smarter theme. And then this last year at Inbound, she then gave us part two, which is AI must handle the sales groundwork. Why? To free up reps to excel at their best, building meaningful relationships, earning trust, and forging deeper customer connections. This is now the true path to sales success. The reason I like these two quotes is it really illustrates two parts that we're going to talk about here. When you scale smart and you have a smart go-to-market and RevOps plan and organization, that means you're truly leveraging your resources, your sales team, your go-to-market teams in the right way. And that's what we're going to talk about here. And with that, let's get started. It's my pleasure to formally hand you over to Heather Hershey at IDC. Heather, tell us a little bit more about transforming enterprise sales. Okay, Heather, you're saying some great things, but you're on mute.
There we go. I was just thanking you,
Perfect.
and I was also thanking everyone for attending and hanging out with us to talk about this interesting sort of relationship between CRM, CPQ, integrations, and everything in between. There's a lot of complexity under the hood there, so I'm not going to waste any more time setting up the premise. Let's get right into it. Our agenda today is jam-packed with all kinds of goodies. First, we're going to start with the connected sales ecosystem, followed by empowering sales with intuitive technology. Then we're going to talk about complex business models and advanced quoting, how that fits in there, the expert integration advantage, and then data-driven sales, the analytics advantage. But before I get into that, I should probably give you a little bit of background about who I am and what I do. My name is Heather Hershey. I'm the Research Director of Worldwide Digital Commerce Strategy at IDC, and I was IIAR Analyst of the Year, Americas, for 2024. My mandate is incredibly horizontal. It includes e-commerce, retail, sales. It includes all the strategic deployments in between for B2B, B2C, and it's got a global remit. So it's incredibly broad, high-level focus, and my main area of expertise is understanding how all of these various integrated systems for commerce are created into these interwoven, interconnected ecosystems of applications, processes, and people to drive revenue outcomes. I think that the time has come to discuss the evolution from siloed sales tools to integrated ecosystems. And this is due to the profound impact that having disconnected systems can have on revenue and sales performance. Disconnected systems lead to data fragmentation. This hampers sales operations by creating inefficiencies and duplication of efforts. And ultimately, this results in a lack of visibility and collaboration across sales processes, which diminishes the effectiveness of sales ops. So later in this presentation, I will provide actionable suggestions for how you can connect your data across business systems for sales to harness the power of AI and predictive analytics for sales. But first, consider a scenario that may sound all too familiar to some of you, where your marketing team may be utilizing something like, say, HubSpot for campaign management and lead generation, but that this valuable information remains isolated just to the marketing team. The sales team, using a separate CRM, lacks access to marketing insights, leading them to engage prospects without comprehensive context, which may lead them to miss critical opportunities. Concurrently, the operations team, working on yet another distinct siloed platform, struggles to efficiently handle orders and customer support due to fragmented data. Have you experienced this personally? Because I know I have in my business, and I talk to clients all the time who are experiencing this. So before I get too far ahead of myself, I'd love to know what you've experienced and the impact of this siloing effect has been within your own teams. What kind of impact has fragmented data sources had on your business? Let us know in the chat. According to IDC research, roughly 41% of sales associates are forced to manually transfer data across systems, and that equals 41% of their day. It significantly impacts productivity. Again, a lot of this is due to, frankly, a Frankenstein monster of a bunch of different processes that are cobbled together using disparate, disconnected systems that may have a lot of technical debt and procedural and functional redundancy. And these disconnected systems necessitate manual data entry between the platforms, which can lead to a lot of human error. This makes for a challenging day for sales teams. It's frustrating. It may amplify churn rates. And employees burdened with manual data handling and navigating between these systems are frankly less efficient because they have to start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. They can't concentrate on the things that are going to lead to those enhanced revenue outcomes. So this not only impacts their productivity, but can lead them to burnout. As the age-old marketing adage goes, there's got to be a better way. And there is. The path to gaining control over revenue operations, or RevOps for short, relies on the unification of data and more integrated processes. Why? Well, as we just explored, disconnected systems lead to fragmented data, making it challenging to get a comprehensive view of business. So how are you going to get actionable insights, better analytics, predictive analytics, if you don't have your data right? Without accurate real-time information, decision-making suffers all across the organization, but particularly among sales teams, where oftentimes those decisions need to be made as quickly as possible. Integrating data from disparate systems under a single pane of glass for actionable insights can have an immediate positive impact on revenue. For instance, McKinsey reports that data-driven organizations are 23 times. Let me just slow down a second and read that stat again. They're 23 times more likely to acquire customers and 6 times more likely to retain them. You cannot have growth without retention. So even though 6x sounds a lot less impressive than 23x, that is still a major win. This indicates that there is another significant upside to unifying your data. It results in the delivery of superior customer experiences, which is like printing money in the context of B2B sales. But beyond sales performance, it's also important to consider the experience of your customers when they're engaging with sales. Ultimately, by empowering sales with intuitive technology, which by the way could be omnichannel. You could be talking about conventional sales, direct sales, you could be talking about e-commerce sales. You'd want all of those things to be a continuous, fluid conversation with your customer base. And by empowering sales teams, regardless of the medium they're working in, with intuitive technology, your company can expect a dual benefit for employees and your customers, and more loyalty in both parts. The employee user experiences less busy work and can gain satisfaction from a streamlined workday that allows them to focus on the revenue generation and business development at the heart of their mission. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, your customers get the benefit of a more direct engagement with sales when they want it, and more impactful, relevant self-service experiences in digital commerce environment when that's their preference. All of this is done via better data leverage, partnering with excellent technology and implementation firms, modern strategic sales planning that includes digital commerce technology, and the strategic use of AI to remove friction and redundancy while compressing time to value. IDC predicts that by 2028, 25% of customer service agents will have evolved into the role of concierge to customers, bridging the gap between quota-earning roles, sales, and customer success, and pure service. As you may have already guessed, this requires a unified data model. I know I sound like a broken record, but that's because it's very, very important and requires this level of emphasis and repetition. This unified data model is a principle you may have also heard called unified commerce in the context of digital commerce. And it is a strategic vision that breaks down silos and leverages AI to provide customers with a more relevant, contextually substantive, and connected human-centric experience that transcends specific sales channels. At IDC, we call the customer-facing side of this transcendent commerce due to the ability to transcend sales channels and create a continuous and self-perpetuating customer journey, regardless of the medium or method of engagement. IDC likes to highlight the importance of unified customer data for delivering personalized experiences across marketing, sales, and customer service. But unifying all of RevOps requires robust partnerships with technologies that enable your ambitions and can future-proof your business against fluctuations in the global commercial landscape, which could not possibly be more relevant than it is right now. And expert implementation partners are also required. They can help you steer clear of known bottlenecks and impediments to growth. For example, in B2B digital commerce, this might include the ability to offer your customers frictionless selling with easier quotes and streamlined negotiations, personalized, relevant, and impactful recommendations for product bundles and cross-sell and upsell opportunities in self-service portals, digital sales rooms, and intelligent guided sales. But these are just a small sampling of the possible enhancements augmenting human sales capabilities with novel, and again, I'm going to keep reiterating, relevant and insightful features for users of the technology and customers on the buyer's side of the journey. Bundling, upselling, and cross-selling pulls the need for harmonious integration between a CRM and CPQ, or sometimes multiple, depending on the complexity of your organization. And it pulls this need for harmony between these systems into sharp focus, as each of these capabilities requires advanced quoting in the context of complex business models, such as those that use multi-tier pricing, blended business models that are both B2B and B2C, or catalogs that mix complex configurable products and aftermarket services. But those are just a few examples, obviously. You need strategic partners that can enhance profitability by tailoring prices to specific customer needs, such as retail, wholesale, or distributor pricing. Advanced approval workflow capabilities may be required to streamline the quote approval process by automating tasks and ensuring that quotes adhere to customer company policies. And what about field sales teams, who often face unreliable internet connectivity, making offline capabilities crucial for mobile sales apps? You may also require features that enable reps to access customer data when they're in the field. They may need to place orders. They may need to perform other tasks without that internet activity. And this can be done via asynchronous data uploading once connectivity resumes, ensuring continuous productivity and customer satisfaction without interruptions in the field. IDC emphasizes also the importance of strategic planning and expertise in IT projects. For instance, successful CRM and CPQ implementations require integration service vendors with solid industry and technical expertise to achieve desired business outcomes. This expertise is worth its weight in gold because it ensures that projects meet their objectives efficiently and on schedule. Specialized knowledge is essential for connecting systems effectively. This includes designing how information, your data, is stored and moved, which requires understanding business needs and how different components connect. And these strategic partnerships help future-proof business by providing information and access to new technologies, expertise, and resources, allowing you to capitalize on emerging opportunities more effectively. I would like to leave with this particular slide just so you know where you can follow me. Thank you so much for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions when the Q&A session begins.
Absolutely, Heather, this is great. And yes, we will have you featured prominently in that Q&A. We're going to hand over to Oscar, but before we do, Heather, stay on for a second. I'm going to read some of the great comments that we got from folks when we asked them, what were your go-to-market challenges or concerns? First, we heard this a couple times. We heard CRM and lead scoring. We heard lead gen and leveraging some of the new HubSpot features. And Oscar, that's going to be relevant. I know you're going to talk about that. Another one, Evan mentioned lead gen. Thomas mentioned having a growth strategy for our agency. Heather, I know you talked about some strategic aspects as well. We also, Nicole and Liz both mentioned quoting and integrations with ERP systems. And then finally, Heather, a point you made as well, issues with data and reporting. So we're going to talk more about that, and those will come up also in the Q&A. So Heather, thank you. Join us again in a second. Let's hand things over. Oscar, this is a great jumping off point to hear from you and what HubSpot is doing to help folks today with their go-to-market efforts.
All right, everyone. I'm going to share my screen, and my goal today in the next 10 minutes is just to give you some tips on how we can use HubSpot to essentially unify your data and give you some simple guides on how to streamline your marketing and sales efforts. These steps might sound basic, but in the decade or so that I've worked with HubSpot, I've seen people are missing a lot of these steps or not doing them as effectively as they could. So this little triangle here is called my lead handoff hierarchy of needs, kind of a steal of the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And these are the fundamental things that you need to do to make sure that your marketing team and your sales team are working harmoniously for a lead handoff. So let's start with the basics. Leads need to be routed to sales. So the sales team needs to have a way to be notified when a new lead is generated. Sounds simple, but a lot of the times that just doesn't happen. Next, once a sales rep gets a qualified lead, they need to follow up with that lead as soon as possible. The more you delay in that follow-up, the worse that initial conversation is going to be. Once we check that box off, the next is we need to be able to provide context to the sales rep. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've seen sales reps get qualified leads, but they don't know why that lead was qualified. They don't know what form or activity they performed to become a lead. So we need to provide context. And the final step is we need to see how that lead is progressing. Have the sales reps actually turned that lead into qualified opportunities, or have they disqualified them for XYZ reason? So I'll walk you through how we can accomplish this in HubSpot in the next 9-ish or so minutes. First, let's go through a hypothetical. Now, I don't know how many of you all have used HubSpot on the marketing side, but let's pretend that we have this landing page and form built out in HubSpot. This is promoting a content offer. Let's call it a big data ebook. Individual comes to your website, fills out this form so that they can access this content. This all happens within HubSpot, and ultimately what this generates is a list of leads. Now, typically, someone that's downloaded an ebook or a content offer isn't ready to talk to the sales team just yet. We need to qualify them a little further. So what we can do with these leads is nurture them by providing more offers. So here's an example of a lead nurturing process. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I really want to talk about the sales handoff. But this workflow basically says anyone who downloaded that ebook, we are going to follow up with them by providing them that ebook through an email. Then we are going to use branching logic to see if they've interacted with that email. And if they have, let's promote another offer, in this case, a free consultation with our sales team. Let's pretend this hypothetical worked perfectly. Now what we're going to do is we are going to send them an email with a link to a page that looks like this. This is where the process starts. This is how we generate a qualified lead. We can either have them fill out a form to schedule that consultation, but we also have other tools. Most of the time nowadays, people don't like filling out a form and just waiting. So we have tools like meeting links where people can book directly on a sales rep's calendar. Or we even have options where people can either chat in, call in, or email a shared inbox, right? All different ways that folks can convert as a qualified lead. So what happens now once someone has filled out a form and said, hey, I want to talk to a salesperson? This is where we get to that first stage in the triangle. How do we hand off a lead to sales? We have a couple of ways to do that. I'm going to show you really quickly another workflow. This one is more an internal process workflow. This takes anyone who has filled out that form or scheduled that meeting and puts them in a workflow that marks them as a qualified lead. We then use branching logic to identify who is the best sales rep to follow up with them. So this can be based on sales location, product they're interested in, any type of information that can divvy up who on the sales end needs to follow up. So the first action is we route them to an individual sales rep. So in this case, it is me. And to satisfy that first triangle, we need to notify the sales rep that they have a new qualified lead. So the way that I'm doing this is simply by automating an email that sends out a notification to the sales rep with all of the pertinent information on that contact. To make sure that that sales rep is following up with that lead, I'm also creating a task that's visible within HubSpot, right? So the sales rep now has an email notifying them of a lead and a task notifying them of a lead. So boom, we've checked off that first triangle. Sales has been notified. Now the second triangle, sales needs to follow up with that lead as soon as possible. The cool thing about HubSpot is that we can automate that outreach. So the last task or action in this workflow actually sends an email from the sales rep's inbox. This is what that email looks like. It can be something like, hey, I noticed that you filled out our contact us form. Here's some more information that you might find relevant. I'll be reaching out to you as soon as possible. So within this automated workflow, we have notified the sales rep that they have a new lead, and we've sent a message on behalf of the sales reps so that that person can get some information quickly from us. Now let's jump into the third box, which is how do we get the sales rep context on who the heck these people are that are leads? One of the simplest way to do that is just to create a list of contacts with all of the pertinent information. So what I have here is a list that a sales rep can see of all of their qualified leads. We can have a lead score that looks at that individual's engagement and demographic information to score them so the sales rep can prioritize. We have the form that they filled out that turned them into a qualified lead. And if we want to get even more context, we can always click into the contact profile. I call this the heart of HubSpot because this is where all of the pertinent information on an individual sits. We have the information that we know about this person, maybe from that form submission. We also have all of the activities that this person has taken. So for example, the forms that they've submitted, the pages that they viewed, the email interactions with us. And this just gives the sales rep all the context that they need in order to make that initial outreach worthwhile, because I can see exactly which pages you viewed, what you're interested in, where you work at, etc. So we're making our way. We've routed the lead to sales. We followed up with that person immediately. We've provided the sales rep with all the context that they need. Final step, how do we keep track of what's happening with this lead? So typically how the process works is once a sales rep interacts with a contact and qualifies them as a potential opportunity, what you would do now is you would log that potential opportunity by creating a deal in HubSpot. This basically creates a record for an opportunity to sell a service or a product to Clifton. That deal, once it's created, will live in a pipeline. So now the sales rep can see all of their opportunities and they can move them from stage to stage. But ideally, what we also want to see is what kind of products or services we are actually trying to sell to this individual, because that's going to help close the loop. This is when we get to the deal record, specifically creating a quote. Now, what I'm showing you right now is how we can use the Mobileforce tool within HubSpot to list out the products and services that we're selling for an individual contact, helping us make sure that we track that lead progress. So I'm going to click New CPQ Proposal. This is going to open up an iframe into Mobileforce. The first thing that you'll see is that this proposal is already generated with all the information that we have on the company. We can also identify the contact that we're working with. The next thing that we can do once we have all the information on the customer filled out is start working on the quote. So we can go in and start adding specific line items. So let's say that we are going to be selling a specific part, this forklift. I think it's a forklift. All right, so we've added the line item. The next thing that we need to do is go through the process of approving this quote. If it is over $10,000, you can see here it needs director approval, and we can also identify who needs to sign this. So while I wait for approval, I'm going to go ahead and just save this to the CRM. And if I go back into HubSpot and give this a reload, what you'll now see is that we have our deal, and we also have the line item that we've added to the deal listed here. So what we've done now is we've married our marketing handoff, our sales prospecting, and our deal and CPQ process all within HubSpot. So we've been able to pass off a lead, qualify that lead, create a deal, and make sure that we keep track of the proposals and the line items within that deal. At the end of the day, this kind of just helps unify this whole process so everything is streamlined, but also all the data lives within one place. I know that was pretty quick, but I was only given 10 minutes, so I hope that was helpful.
That was extremely helpful, Oscar. In fact, we even got some good quick questions. Let me just ask you those, and then we'll jump over to Jagadish. First, somebody asked, how do you deal with leads that schedule directly on the calendar on the landing page, but without first verifying that they're qualified? And what do you do if they aren't qualified? Are there any best practices, Oscar, that you've seen with the companies you work with?
So there is a new feature in HubSpot that allows individuals to fill out a form, and then based on the form that's filled out, you can route them to a meetings link or not route them to a meetings link. So simple way that you can do it is ask some qualifying questions within a form. If they seem like a good fit, then you route them to a meetings link. If they don't seem like a good fit, maybe route them to a shared inbox or a chatbot, essentially saving only the qualified leads to access that meetings link, because you don't want your sales rep to have a bunch of unqualified contact scheduling time with them. So for lack of a better word, basically just hiding that meetings link behind some type of form that has qualifying questions.
Excellent. That's a great question. Great answer. Thanks, Oscar. What we'll do is we're going to jump to Jagadish, but any more questions, just drop them in Q&A. We will touch on as many as we can there. And thank you, Oscar. With that, let me hand things over to Jagadish from Mobileforce to talk about robust no-code quoting and CPQ.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Oscar. That was great. Can you see my screen okay? Coming through okay?
100%. Looks great.
Excellent. So I'm going to take up the bottom of the funnel related issues. Oscar talked a lot about the lead to the opportunity and even touched on some of the quoting aspects. One of the common things we hear from customers is as they're scaling, we are talking about scaling smarter. As they're scaling, how do they make sure that they set up systems from a from a bottom of the funnel perspective, that is from the point you start to do the quote or proposal, go through contract, go through negotiations, get the contract closed, get the onboarding done. All of that process typically involves today a lot of manual work, and there's a lot of inefficiencies there. So as you're trying to scale and scaling smarter, one of the common questions we hear is, how do we put together a system that will help them for long-term success so that you can consistently produce quick, accurate, and compliant quotes and proposals? So those things become very important and top of mind as you're starting to scale. Compliance is very important. You want the entire organization, sales organization, following a common set of best practices and rowing in the same direction. And so I'm going to speak a little bit about those aspects here. So if you look at from a quoting perspective, Oscar showed a couple of things there with respect to a simple quote workflow. One of the things that is almost a given, especially in B2B sales, is there's a lot of variability in seller experience. No two organizations sell the same way. They have the same inputs, or they have the exact same workflow and the pieces of things that they need to go through as they create and craft a proposal and send it out. So you need a system that will very quickly adapt and mold itself to your workflow, not the other way around. Customizing it easily for sellers' workflow is a common need that we hear over and over again. The second thing is a system that can adapt to different routes to market. A lot of organizations sell direct. They also sell indirect through resellers, partners, what have you, and they also sell a lot online or e-commerce nowadays. So can you have a unified single system that can power all routes to market? That's another common requirement that we see as a use case. And the third is simply the speed. A system that is fast enough to keep up with the rapid change in go-to-market strategies and tactics that your go-to-market teams are coming up with. You can come up with new bundles, new promotions, and things like that as you scale smarter and scale faster. So you need a system that can operationalize all of those tactics into real sales workflows and playbooks that salespeople can actually go and execute on. And if you don't have a system that can do it very quickly, you're just going to have ideas, but you can't put that in practice. So those are three things that we hear as people scale smarter and scale faster and smarter. People ask about that. So I want to touch upon those three things. While I talk about CPQ, CPQ has been around for a couple of decades now. But it has also evolved, and it has evolved in ways where it can address some of those challenges that I cited there. New systems and new innovations are coming to address those. And there's a lot of innovation going on in evolving CPQ as things that are done even pre-quote to help you get into a quoting workflow faster and better. So that means in the discovery phase, in the qualification phase, are there things that can be captured right in the context of a quoting environment so you can jointly engage with the customer and feed the data to automatically make decisions? We all live in the world of AI. So the more data you capture, the better the systems can automatically put things together for you, as opposed to you having to go and manually add it. Then on the other end of the quote, once you get the quote done and you get the contract signed, one of the other key pieces is how do you onboard new customers? How do you get them into service departments? How do you get into, if you're a SaaS company, how do you kind of drive the subscription and the provisioning? How do you set up, feed the invoicing systems? These become very important because if you have a seamless handoff between the CPQ and those downstream systems, or to the extent that a single system can cover it, you are going to be better placed for success. So if you put in place an automated and optimized system like that works hand in hand with the CRM, you are bound to reap a lot of benefits. Some of the common things that we've heard and seen through our own implementations and customers is a massive decrease in proposal approval times. Approvals always take a long time. Things get stuck just because there are so many manual processes involved. The other thing is definitely a faster and better lead to close cycle time as well as conversion rates. Those are two things that are tangible benefits that we've seen. Certainly, of course, getting quotes out of the door faster, more accurate, and compliant. When I say compliant, that means putting out quotes that are fulfillable, putting out quotes where you don't have line items that may be inadvertently misconfigured just because the sales rep didn't catch it in time or the system didn't auto-correct them. These are common problems that we see, and they lead to a lot of delays later on either at a deal desk or if you're dealing with channels from the channel desk perspective. So these are all some of the things that we've seen in terms of improvements by putting improvements in terms of putting together a automated and optimized system. I want to just double click on a few use cases that we hear as you scale. Try to do more complex environments, going to more complex environments, and as you scale faster. And how do you do that, right? And as you, especially as companies scale, one of the most common things that we hear is, how do you have a system that can keep up with the speed of new bundles, new promotions, new approval rules that they're putting in place? So that's where the no-code aspect comes in. If we can have a system that puts the power in the hands of the practitioners, where they can go make those changes themselves instead of raising an IT ticket or instead of going out and doing a lot of programming, that's going to serve you better. That's going to help you put those ideas into practice very quickly. The other thing that we also hear is the ability to combine a wide variety of different things in a single proposal, so that such as selling products, selling subscriptions. A lot of businesses, moving to subscription-based models. Maybe they were previously selling on-premise products or perpetual licenses, and now they're moving into subscriptions, and they still have some that's a combination of both. How do you code both? How do you code services, consulting services or support services? How do you code software and hardware together? These are all things that come up. The other thing that I think somebody mentioned actually earlier on is, how do you integrate in real time data from other systems? Not all pieces of data is ever going to always sit in your CRM or in your CPQ, as much as we wish, right? There's a lot of data that sits. For example, if you're quoting a particular product and you want to check whether it's in stock, that may be sitting in your ERP or your inventory management system. You want to calculate taxes, things like that. So there may be information that needs to flow in seamlessly in real time from other systems. And to the extent that the CPQ system can integrate that and integrate that in your logic and your templates and your workflow, it's going to be so much better and faster for you to get an accurate code out of the door. A couple of other pieces there is around routes to market. I mentioned routes to market. So, not only can you sell things direct, how do you enable somebody to kind of come to a branded portal to be able to kind of do their own quotes and proposals? Things like that. That's an important piece that comes in handy. The other thing that comes in handy is, how do you enable a mobile optimized workforce where they can quote anywhere, anytime, with the ability to do offline quoting. And the last but not the least is I mentioned this earlier, how do you integrate pre-quote and post-quote steps? So for example, even before you do quote, how do you do some sort of a joint engagement plan where the discovery information can seamlessly go into the quote and through AI automatically add line items to your system? And then coming out on the other side, once you have a quote that is completed, how do you say, okay, I'm ready to onboard? And when you're ready to onboard, how do you automatically pass information to a service initiation or onboarding? How do you go through quote closure set of steps, checklists, and then pass it on seamlessly to your service department? These are some of the things that we've implemented, and we've seen that leads to some pretty significant benefits. What's important while we put all of that together is an expert partner, somebody who can take all of these pieces and put that together. And I can't stress enough that that is a key component. And I would love to hand it off to Bryan. He's an expert at it. He can talk to how we can put together all of these pieces between CRM and CPQ and even third-party systems and put together a solution that's ready for you to scale smarter.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jagadish. And Bryan, why don't you take it from there? Also, keep the questions coming. Jagadish, that was great. Any questions, drop them in the Q&A. We'll get to those. Bryan, take it away.
Thanks, Don. Let's resume here at slide 15, and we'll get into it. So there's a quote that I love from Atomic Habits. You've never read it, great book, highly recommend it. But it goes something like, You don't rise to reach the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, okay? And I don't think that can be more true when it comes to scaling revenue. A lot of leaders we talk to, they approach growth by just throwing more people at the problem, more reps, more spend, more tools. Maybe it works, but that's not scalable. So things we've been talking about are ways to do that better. If your systems are inefficient, disconnected, adding headcount is just going to make it worse, not better. So the question we look at is the foundation is ready to scale, or the basic building blocks there for us? And that means getting down to optimized processes, new systems, making sure your team are not fighting the tools and they're kind of empowered by their tools. So, that's we'll focus our remainder of our time on together. So moving on to the next slide here, we'll look at kind of understanding some critical gaps kind of in your RevOps ecosystem we talk today. At Aptitude, we work with primarily growing companies, and the same challenges happen again and again and again. A lot of complexity in systems, poor adaptation of systems. We see tools that are too complicated, fragmented, so your sales reps and CX and support teams just stop using them. Adoption is an issue. Data silos are persistent. Marketing's working in one system, sales work in another, support in a third system. There's no shared system of truth. And thereby no way to measure your impact across the customer journey. We've got manual stuff, manual lead handoffs. A surprising number of mid-market and enterprise clients are still doing manual lead handoffs. Let's automate it, guys. Follow-ups, the deal updates that aren't automated are taking time. On top of that, aging technology, it just creates friction. And it's often like duct taped together like some kind of Franken system. Probably the most common one you see is just a lack of alignment between sales and marketing teams. And if your handoffs between those teams aren't clean, if your definitions of qualified leads or your ideal customer profiles, your ICPs are not clear and shared, then it doesn't matter how strong the strategy is. Execution is going to break down. Your time to value is going to decrease, and your close rates are ultimately going to be impacted by that. So these are all gaps that stall growth, and most companies have more than one. So looking ahead at the next slide here, we'll look at connected systems. This is how we fix it. What is the solution? Having connected, integrated systems. So when your CRM is a single source of truth, you eliminate a lot of the bottlenecks that I spoke about. Sales, marketing, CX, they're all on the same page. There's that single source of truth. We can automate those low value tasks, lead routing, task creation, et cetera. That way your reps aren't wasting time on busy work. With the emergence of AI, we're getting new AI powered insights. They don't just tell you what happened, they tell you what's likely to happen next, right? And I'll say that again. Where AI is taking us from we look at call summaries. I was on the call. Thank you. But I was on the call. But we look at what's going to happen next. We look at predictive analytics, and that's coming. And that's some of the things that Heather talked about earlier is kind of where data is headed in this ecosystem. By doing these things, we're going to increase the visibility. That way your leadership team can make smarter decisions, faster decisions, and your teams can actually act on them. It allows us to be proactive instead of reactive. And that's really what it's all about. And so when everything's working together, you optimize the resources you already have instead of consistently needing to add more resources. Which brings us to the next slide here. We're looking at the different stages of strategic transformation. So obviously the transformations we've talked about today, they still happen overnight. There's a kind of an iterative process that it typically follows. Here's how we like to approach it. So first, we want to do an audit of what's not working, right? We'll audit things like what's manual, what's fragmented, where are breakdowns, what's slowing your reps down, what's breaking during handoffs. And that takes some real intentional introspection to kind of step back and do it. Hiring external consultants can help with that. Sometimes, when you're in the forest, you can't see through the trees, even in your own systems. Next, we look at mapping the data flows, right? Your customer journey. When was the last time the executive team ever sat down and mapped out their customer journey? It's probably been a while. Does that stay in marketing, or is marketing, sales, RevOps, CX? Are we all aware of the customer journey? Do we all think it's the same? Right. So then we can look at, hey, where's your data getting stuck? Or do we have integration points in the right places? And all that allows us to build out what we've been talking about. Kind of the theme today is this concept of unified data infrastructure, right? Heather talked about this, Jagadish talked about this, Oscar talked about this, right? It is really that important. A single source of truth, one customer platform, gets all the data in one place so we can actually trust and have confidence. And so that with that foundation in place again, then we can prioritize high impact automations, right? That's scalable automation, things like scoring, routing, task creation, all those things that directly affect your pipeline management. And finally, you get to be able to streamline your actual teams, not by cutting costs or cutting people, but by giving them tools and processes that allow them to move faster with less friction. And that is what scalable RevOps looks like. to kind of bring us all together here. Here at Aptitude, we believe that this is where HubSpot fits in, right? It does a great job of doing that customer platform function we talked about. It's going to provide that unified data system we talked about, single source of system across all of your teams, right? It's very intentional how it's built and architected. All the teams are working from the same data set. It allows for simple automations and complex automations, lead routing, prioritization. We're ensuring that the best opportunities get to your reps the fastest. Lead scoring as well, not to discount that in any way. All these things are going to reduce your admin burden, reduce the number of tasks that are necessary. And with the convergence of Breeze AI and Copilot, AI makes that even easier. Okay. It's going to, at least for us, what we see a lot is a lot more cross-team collaboration, cross-functional collaboration than we do with other CRMs and ERPs and stuff like that, because all the tools are built together on the same platform. And that allows it to be more innovative, on the higher end of cutting edge of technology. But the other end we look at is intuitive, right? And when systems are intuitive, they're easier to use. We see higher adoption rates, et cetera, et cetera. There's no learning curve, maybe a minor one, but not a steep one. And we don't need like bloated operations teams to manage the thing. So all this translates to, for clients we work with, just a lower total cost of ownership. We see faster implementation timelines, and what you get, is a scalable RevOps infrastructure. And so when you're combining HubSpot with the right strategy, layer in Mobileforce for your advanced quoting, that's how you build out a modern RevOps engine that we believe really just drives sustainable growth in 2025.
This is great. Fantastic, Bryan. Thank you. And that's a really great segue when you talk about RevOps and RevOps efficiency and alignment. I think first, let's just take that into our Q&A. So first, we've got a lot of great questions. We're going to get to as many of those as we can. Second, we'll get all of our panelists to turn their cameras on and come off mute. Third, Bryan, for you and Jagadish, let's start with Jagadish and then back to Bryan. The question is, what pitfalls or traps should companies keep in mind as they're trying to integrate their sales tools and systems and streamline their RevOps? Let's start with Bryan first, and then we'll go to Jagadish on that. What sort of pitfalls or challenges have you seen?
Yeah, the biggest ones are related to the systems we're using, right? What often happens is your business's needs are very different, when they're 5, 10, 15 employees than they are at 35, 40, 50 employees, and then it goes up from there. But that growth juncture may happen in a year, could happen in 9 months. So the biggest problem we see is organizations roll out tools that make sense at the time, but they don't reevaluate that, right? Every year we need to be looking at, are the tools still working, or have we already outgrown them, already outscaled them? So I'd say outscaling your existing systems and not investing in larger systems or more scalable systems that can grow with you is probably the biggest issue we see, the biggest pitfall.
That's well said. Jagadish, how about over to you from the RevOps quoting proposal side? What are the challenges and traps you've seen?
Yeah, I think the main one I've seen is people sort of jumping into looking at the quoting as sort of a tactical item, and then they start to kind of implement it, and then they kind of go along. I think what we always recommend, it's a key component of your revenue engine, right? So always kind of step back and look at what are all the different routes to market you have, what are all the sales motions you have, and sort of documenting it and figuring out, in order to make sure that you have your business objectives very clear in terms of how quickly you want to get a proposal out. What are the elements that you want to be able to present to a customer that will, because the few pages of document that you're going to share with the customer, that's going to represent you, right? How do you put the best foot forward, right? And how do you make sure that leads to a sale, that leads to a close? And there are a lot of elements that go into it, and that pieces of data may come from different systems. So where does that sit? Can that information be made available to the seller as they go through the quoting and proposal generation process? I think documenting some of that ahead of time will really help configure your system in the best possible way to make sure that you can execute on that promise, right? And reap the benefits of it. I think that's one area where I always tell customers that, you want to kind of not look at the status quo and how you've been doing things based on your scaling goals and based on where you want to be. Pose the challenge, ask the question, can we enhance and improve the time and the efficiency of your quote to close, and pose the challenge and see if that can be documented upfront. That always helps.
That makes total sense. Very compelling, which is a good segue to our next question. Heather, we're going to go to you and then Oscar. The question is, as you're working with companies, they need to show ROI. How should companies measure the ROI of integrating their marketing and sales tools and systems and aligning their RevOps? How do you advise folks to evaluate that, Heather?
Great question. I have been speaking with a lot of different enterprise technology buyers and integration partners, et cetera, to try to get a handle on this exact question. And what I've witnessed is that companies increasingly approach ROI in terms of operational efficiency and revenue velocity rather than just pure cost savings. So integration reduces lead leakage, accelerates handoffs, and enhances attribution modeling, all of which are incredibly important to sales success. The most sophisticated firms are using time to revenue, pipeline acceleration, and customer acquisition cost compression as key indicators. Then there's also a growing emphasis on, of course, lifetime value and the improvements driven by unified data flows and consistent customer engagement across the funnel. And the quality of those engagements really matters in a profound manner, because as technology buyers realize that they have to experiment with their go-to-market strategies and their channel strategies and how they re-envision the future of sales and marketing, for that matter, it becomes highly important for them to think about, things that may sound sci-fi outside of a certain context. Like one of those things is, how do you recognize when you're interacting with something like agentic AI, like a procurement bot? And how do you create a customer journey for that scenario? I mean, there are a lot of complex things to consider, not just now, but within the next, year to 2 years. And I think right now, with uncertainty being the norm, going back to the terra firma of, time to revenue, pipeline acceleration, those are really great places to start. But then also thinking about what the future KPIs will look like and what future customer journeys will look like will also be very important.
Yeah, change is definitely accelerated. So that's a great point. And let me weave in Oscar. Oscar, really a two-part question. How do you and your team work with companies that ask those questions about ROI with RevOps? And then a question from the audience is, hey, if I want to transition over to HubSpot, how do I deal with these stubborn contracts that might have penalties or poison pills? I assume for the latter one, they can reach out to the sales team, and we've got the contact info for each of the companies here. But Oscar, do you want to speak to those two questions?
Yeah, so regarding ROI, I think most of the time people just don't have the means to create an actual ROI report. So typically we show them how creating ROI reports is possible where they can at the moment. So for example, if you have this large marketing event and you have a siloed marketing tool to your sales tool and your services tool, having an ROI report is very difficult. I know I'm biased, but if you have your marketing team, your sales team, your service team operating within the same system, and if that system is HubSpot, creating ROI reports is extremely easy. And you can figure out if that event resulted in leads, if that resulted in new opportunities, and then ultimately you can tie a revenue number to the event or the marketing campaign or the email. So long story short, actually being able to create ROI is most of the battle. On the second front, we deal with this all the time. Someone is looking to move to HubSpot, but they are in an existing contract with a vendor. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to the actual contract, but what I can say is that there is always a benefit to having an overlap between the two systems. Bryan can attest to this as well because his team does a lot of these migrations. We'd recommend at a minimum 90 to 120 days of overlap between your existing tool and HubSpot while you're migrating over, because there's going to be a situation, let's say on day 98, where you realize, hey, I forgot to migrate over something important. So having those two tools overlapping is necessary. Don't quote me on this, but sometimes what we do is we add discounts to offset the cost of your existing tool. So I can't tell you to break your contract, but I can tell you having an overlap in tools and talking to your sales team at HubSpot about overlapping the discounts could help a little bit.
Absolutely. Oscar, and suffice it to say, they can reach out to sales@hubspot.com to get more information and to talk to somebody. Let's shift gears. Both Bryan and Jagadish talked about quote to close processes and the importance of streamlining that. Let's start with Jagadish. When you are talking to companies and they're trying to assess their options, what are the 2 or 3 key things they should be keeping in mind as they're trying to streamline their quote to close to approval proposal processes?
Yeah, great question. I would say, from all the surveys we've done and all the sort of anecdotal information we've heard from people who implemented different kinds of CPQ systems over the years, right? It's been in the market for a long time. Some of the areas where they've found challenges or where they've had poor adoption or if things have failed, usually boil down to 3 things, right? And these are things that we focus on. One is you need a system that can very quickly adapt to your selling workflow, your seller experience, what your sellers users experience. If it's too rigid and it's too fixed and you're forcing behavioral change, it usually backfires. It doesn't go very well. So that means you need a system that can mold itself very well to whatever your workflow is, what people are used to for years and years and years, right? So inputs they do, the workflow they follow, etc. That's one piece. The second piece is from a sales ops, RevOps perspective, you need a system that's, again, doesn't take too long, months and months, for example, sometimes it has taken, right, to sort of take your ideas, go-to-market ideas and tactics and strategies and put that in practice. So specifically, new rules, new pricing and new promotions and new discount approvals or bundles. These are things, people are always in the marketing world, go-to-market world, they're always thinking about creative ways to sell more, sell faster, right? And so you need a system that can keep up with the change, that pace of change. That's one thing that the people always talk about. And then the third most important thing I would say is just the data integration. I mean, I can't stress enough that you want to make sure that everything that goes into that coding logic that sort of can be pre-populated, can be automatically decided on behalf of the seller. It's going to help you close more deals. It's going to help you close faster, right? You don't want a system that will leave a lot of open-ended questions where it's now the burden of the sales rep to go collect that information, put that in place, and then kind of make the right kind of choices in terms of products and services combinations that go. If there is a system that can sort of automatically recommend even, take that information up front and use the power of the rules and the AI to sort of recommend things, product or service recommendations, that's going to help you in the new world we live in, where the ability to do things and get back to your customers quickly with a proposal is going to help you whether you close that fast or not. So sure. I usually focus on those areas.
Those are key areas to do. I think we are at time, but before we wrap up, let me hand things over to Bryan to bring us home. Jagadish, if you want to just share that contact information slide one more time. As you answer this, Bryan, Oscar, we did get a HubSpot question in the chat if you want to address that. If we didn't get to your question, you can reach us here at this with these details. Bryan, can you take us home and just pick up on what Jagadish said, which is as folks are considering evaluating their RevOps and next steps, whether it's the quote to closing processes or lead gen, lead management, CRM, what are the final 1 or 2 things they should be thinking about as they move forward with those next steps?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say approaching that as an organization that has identified needs for this, hey, it's not working, we're going to update it. First, you want to assign an internal task force, Tiger team. You need somebody to be responsible for this evaluation. It can be a leader, it can be an individual contributor. Some combination is probably good. And then one of the things that team will need to determine is, hey, do we have the in-house capabilities to do this? Right? Can we select a vendor? Can we implement the tool on our own? Or do we need some external support? Whether that's an industry consultant to help you with the tools evaluation, select the right tool, or an implementation partner to help you implement the right tool. But those are kind of the 3 things. Is 1, you need somebody to be responsible for it. So run it like an internal project. 2, I would say determine whether you can be internal, in-house, or you need to be external, you need a partner. And 3, just, as Jagadish said, understanding the data and the necessary integrations, because you can do all the right things, but if you don't have the data in all your right systems, then you're likely not getting the ROI you're looking for out of it.
Absolutely. That's really well said. I know we're at time. Any questions we didn't get to, we can and will follow up. I want to thank everyone. First, let me just thank all of you that joined us. This is a very engaged audience. Second, I want to thank our panelists, Heather, Oscar, Bryan, and Jagadish. And also want to invite you to continue to follow all of us. You can see our links here. I want to thank the team at Aptitude 8, as well as IDC and HubSpot for all the work and support on this. And we'll see you at our next event. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.